EAM is the hour when truth feels louder than pain. I remember the hum of fluorescent lights before I remembered my own name. Cold air. Antiseptic. A steady monitor tone that did not match the way my pulse kicked against my ribs. My eyes refused to open all the way at first. Everything was a blur of white and silver and the faint green of medical scrubs moving in my peripheral vision. Then the ache came. A deep, steady, unwelcome throb in my left arm, wrapped tight in bandages held still in a rigid brace. I tried to flex my fingers, and a sharp bolt shot through my wrist so fast my breath stuttered. The ceiling tiles swam for a moment before settling. My throat tasted like metal and hospital dryness. I felt my dog tag resting against my collarbone, like a reminder of who I was when everything else felt unsteady. A nurse murmured to someone out of sight. Vital signs stable. She is waking up. Then a sound I knew intimately, boots on hospital tile. Measured. Professional. A step pattern I had learned to trust. Army medical staff shifted beside me and I blinked fully awake at last. The badge on the nurse uniform read Lopez. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Sergeant Holt, you are in the base medical center. You came in unconscious and in pain. I swallowed. The motion made my jaw ache. I did not answer at first. Soldiers wake up like this. Civilians imagine screaming panic. Military minds flip to assessment. Location. Injury. Threat. Witnesses. Memory lagged a second behind instinct. I forced my voice to work. Time 0307. She responded without checking a clock. The rain outside tapped against the glass. Fort Cavazos rarely sleeps, but it sounded like the rest of the world had paused to listen. My vision cleared, and the pieces landed one by one like rounds chambering. The sterile smell, the faint antiseptic burn in the back of my throat, the weight of medical tape and heavy bandages, the unmistakable pressure of a fracture stabilizer. And then, recognition. Pain in the bone does not lie. Broken. Left forearm, radius likely compromised. My mind cataloged details faster than my pulse could catch up. X-ray sheet clipped to the foot of my bed. Sharp diagonal line across the image. The kind of break caused by force, not accident. And then, memory rose like a tide I could not stop. A kitchen. Thanksgiving weekend. Raised voices. A hand clamping my arm in anger strong enough to bruise muscle through fabric. A shove, the hard snap sound that felt like the world cracking in half. His voice saying words he had repeated my entire life. Discipline. You learn or you obey. The final image before the blackout was not my fall, but his face. Set. Rigid. A man convinced he was right. When memory fully returned, it hit with the same cold certainty as ice water. My father did this. A calm voice pulled me back to the present. A doctor stepped into view, holding the chart. His tone was low, careful, the way medical officers speak when they see trauma that is old and new at the same time. The radiology is clear. This was not accidental. There are signs of older injury patterns. My mouth was dry, but the words came without hesitation. I know. My voice did not shake. It surprised even me how steady it was. He watched me for a long second. Military doctors learn to read silence. MPs learn to hold still under truth. I was both. Nurse Lopez waited. I saw the question in her eyes. Was this a moment for fear, for shame, for excuses? I had spent childhood learning fear, years in uniform unlearning it. Discipline does not break bones. Control does. Silence is what grows it. The doctor finally asked the only question that mattered. Do you wish to file a report? The hospital monitor kept beeping slow, and even like my body knew staying calm was another kind of armor. I took one slow breath. I have seen soldiers fall. I have seen limbs broken by accident in combat. Never once did a fracture look like discipline. My voice was quieter now, not from weakness, but from a kind of decision that feels heavy and liberating at the same time. Yes, I want to report it. Something changed in the room, a shift so subtle most people would miss it. In the military, truth has weight. Once spoken, it demands action. Lopez nodded once and stepped away to call the desk. The doctor made a note and did not question me again. I stared at the X-ray, at the line across the bone that marked the end of one life and the start of something I did not yet have a name for. My father called this discipline. The Army calls it abuse, and I was done being his soldier. My name is Avery Holt. I am 29 years old, a staff sergeant in the United States Army Military Police Corps, 7 years in uniform, 1 overseas deployment to Korea, countless inspections, patrol rotations, paperwork, audits, and late nights learning to read people more carefully than they realized they could be read. People tend to think the Army changes you. Sometimes it does. In my case, it simply gave shape to something already inside me: structure, duty, a belief that rules, when applied with fairness, protect rather than confine. I live in the barracks on Fort Cavazos. Some of my peers moved off base once they made rank craving distant space privacy. I chose the opposite. I like hearing boots echo in the hallway at dawn. I like the sound of cadence drifting from the PT field voices syncing like gears in a machine. Some people hear routine. I hear order. Every morning reveille cuts through the quiet and the flag rises. I straighten my posture almost without thinking. It feels like breathing. On duty, I wear a badge that carries weight. Not power, responsibility. MPs see the best and worst moments in a soldier's life. We are the ones they call when someone disappears into panic at 2 a.m., when alcohol turns sorrow into violence, when trust breaks and the quiet truth needs a witness. I learned early that authority is not a raised voice or a heavy hand. It is calm, precision, the steadiness to stand in mess without becoming part of it. That steadiness did not come from the Army. People assume discipline is handed to you in basic training like a haircut and a uniform, but discipline that lasts starts long before that. I grew up learning silence first, obedience second, emotion last. Some lessons burn their shape into you so deep you do not realize they are wounds until someone else touches them and you flinch. At work, I speak with clarity. At home, for years, I spoke only when spoken to. There is a difference between respecting command and surrendering to control. It took me a long time to see it. In the field, I have processed evidence from scenes that made my stomach turn, homes where love should have lived, but fear slept in every corner. I learned to preserve a scene like a memory that cannot be untangled once you disturb it. Gloves on, camera ready, notes precise, no assumptions, facts only. That training was supposed to be for strangers. I never imagined I would use it to document my own life. Evidence handling, interview technique, chain of custody, domestic violence protocol. These are skills I earned through repetition and patience. The Army did not give me strength. It taught me how to use the strength I already had. My peers sometimes call me Steady Holt. Not loud, not flashy, just consistent as a locked step on parade ground concrete. The kind of soldier who does not rush to speak first because truth arrives cleaner when it is not in a hurry. That steadiness served me well on base. It did not save me at home. Strength in the field does not always translate across a kitchen table. Rank means nothing in a living room where history sits heavier than medals. Soldiers salute me. My father expected silence. In uniform, I hold authority. At home, he held memory hostage. People respect the badge. Family often respects nothing but itself. I did not join the Army to escape him, but the Army taught me what respect looks like when it is real. It looks like earned regard. It sounds like clear communication. It feels like stability, not fear, dressed up as guidance. On base, I am called Sergeant Holt, voice steady, shoulders square, clipboard in hand, radio clipped to vest. When I walk the motor pool or step into the command building, people straighten, nod, address me properly. Respect, there is routine, not negotiation. At home, my full name sounded like a command. Avery, sharp, final. A word that did not ask if I was listening but assumed obedience. I did not realize how different those two tones were until the day they clashed. There is a saying we sometimes repeat in training. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. My training told me to stay calm under pressure. My childhood taught me to disappear in it. I did not know which part of me would win until the moment came. I enforce law for the Army, but at home, my father enforced fear. And fear has a way of convincing you that silence is safety. It took years of structured discipline and distance to realize silence is sometimes surrender disguised as peace. People see uniform and assume invincibility. They forget soldiers bleed too. Not just in battlefields, sometimes in childhood kitchens long before the uniform. We protect others because we rarely learned how to protect ourselves first. Fort Cavazos has seen me strong. My childhood home saw me silent. That contradiction lived inside me like two soldiers standing at attention waiting for someone to give the right order. The night everything broke, I found it. Found. Not the anger, not the sadness, the boundary. The moment when duty to myself outranked duty to the man who raised me. That moment did not come with shouting. It came with clarity, the kind I learned in uniform, the kind that does not shake, the kind that changes everything quietly and then forever. I grew up in Killeen, Texas, a town that breathes with the rhythm of the bass, even for those who never set foot on it. Military pride on every bumper sticker, church bells on Sundays, the kind of place where people wave from porches and pretend they do not see what happens behind closed doors. Our house sat on a quiet street with trimmed lawns and tidy hedges, a picture of American order from the outside. From the sidewalk, we looked like a family that prayed together, supported one another, and believed in tradition. The truth was something else entirely. My father, Robert Holt, ran a small construction business that did well enough to give him confidence and control. Old school was what people called him, firm, traditional, a man who believed discipline was a virtue, and that virtue meant authority belonged to him alone. He believed the world respected him, but it was fear he truly understood. He quoted scripture when it suited him and silence when it did not. My mother Linda moved like a shadow along his decisions. Soft voice, gentle smile, always smoothing things over, an expert in keeping peace by never naming the war. People liked her. She never raised her voice, never raised a hand. She just lowered her eyes and pretended she did not see what she could not bear to challenge. My younger brother Mason inherited the tone of our household like it was passed in his DNA. At 24, he still spoke with my father's certainty, though he did not earn it. He learned early that defying our father meant consequences, but mimicking him meant freedom. He took that path without hesitation. Boys will be boys was a phrase I heard more than I should have. In our house, it meant one boy learned power and one girl learned caution. Emotional lessons come before physical ones. You do not talk back in this house. You do not question me. You owe respect. Respect in his vocabulary meant obedience. Things did not start with shouting or force. They started with tone, the kind that makes your shoulders tighten even if no one else in the room notices. He controlled the temperature of every conversation like a thermostat only he could adjust. If he was pleased, everyone breathed easier. If he was not, silence filled the room like thick fog. We learned to read his footsteps, the weight of them on the stairs, the pause at the doorway, a whole childhood trained in anticipation. He spoke about discipline the way a preacher speaks about salvation, firm but righteous, a father's duty, a man's role. There is a kind of upbringing that turns children into soldiers long before they understand what a uniform means. I was 12 the first time I learned pain could wrap itself in the word lesson. I had forgotten to bring a piece of homework home from school. A small mistake. Normal for a child. My father did not yell. He removed his belt with a calm that felt colder than anger. He told me responsibility builds character, and character builds success. Then he taught me a lesson I did not forget. My mother stood in the doorway, wringing her hands, whispering, "Robert, please," like she did not expect to be heard. Afterward, she pressed ice to my skin and told me he loved me, that he just wanted the best for me, that strong families raise strong children. I did not feel strong, I felt trained. There is a moment in many children's lives when they realize their parent is not protecting them, but shaping them into something they can control. For me, it was not a single moment, but a slow, dawning like sunrise through heavy curtains. I swallowed obedience until it became habit. When I reached high school, teachers called me disciplined, focused, driven. No one asked why. On graduation day, when I walked across the stage, my father took the credit. He shook hands with neighbors and told them he raised me right. I smiled for pictures with a cap on my head and a bruise fading under my sleeve. To him, obedience was love. To me, it was survival. He framed my silence as respect. He told relatives I was a good daughter who understood authority. I was not good. I was careful. The church saw us every Sunday. Pastor Davis would shake my father's hand and tell him he was raising a fine family. My father would nod modest in the way pride tries to look humble. I would sit beside my mother listening to sermons about honor and family and forgiveness, wondering if God noticed the difference between devotion and fear. People assume abuse is loud. The truth is it often whispers. It lives in pauses, in glances, in the way a fork hitting a table can freeze a room because tone means more than words. Physical moments came as punctuation, not paragraphs. A shove disguised as correction, a grip on the wrist disguised as guidance, a raised voice justified as teaching, anger always framed as love. By the time I enlisted, I thought obedience was strength. I thought silence was dignity. The Army did not break me. It showed me I had already been bent. When drill sergeants yelled, their voices felt almost gentle compared to the quiet disapproval that raised me. When commanders demanded accountability, they backed it with fairness, not fear. I thrived in uniform because structure made sense. Rules were written, boundaries were respected. Consequences were clear, not shifting targets. In my family, power belonged to the one who spoke loudest. In the Army, power belonged to the one who earned trust. That difference reshaped me. It did not erase where I came from. Pain does not evaporate when you leave its source. It lingers like an echo. For years, I told myself I was stronger because of him, that he meant well, that he tried. It took almost 3 decades to admit that some lessons are not meant to be carried forward. Some traditions are cages disguised as values. Some fathers mistake fear for respect and call it love. I spent my childhood learning not to defy him. I spent my adulthood learning how wrong that lesson was. There is a version of me that most people know, the one who walks across the motor pool with a radio clipped to her vest and a clipboard tucked under her arm boots hitting pavement with steady rhythm and purpose. Staff Sergeant Holt, the one who gives briefings without checking notes, the one junior soldiers come to when they do not want to disappoint the chain of command because they know disappointment is worse than correction. My voice on duty is firm, calm, measured. I learned early that real authority never rushes. That confidence speaks in steady tone, not noise. I lead morning roll calls, run patrol rosters, check vehicles, sign evidence logs. I have pulled soldiers aside when they were spiraling and coached them into steadier ground. I have stood between anger and regret more times than I can count. I have seen strong men admit fear, and I have listened without judgment because the uniform does not erase humanity. It protects it. When I walk into a barracks hallway to respond to a disturbance call, the room shifts. Even the air seems to pause. The badge matters, the rank matters, but what matters more is what people learn to expect from you. Fairness, composure, responsibility. The quiet truth is that strength is not loud in uniform. It is controlled, contained, recognizable by the way others straighten their shoulders when you enter. I have spoken to commanders with direct eye contact with spine straight and voice steady. I have testified in administrative hearings citing dates and facts without letting emotion bleed into evidence. I have placed handcuffs on wrists when necessary, always respectful, always calm, always aware that humiliation is never part of justice. I have never raised my voice on duty. I did not need to. And yet that same voice when walking into my parents' home felt like it disappeared. Not because I lost rank there, but because history weighs more than stripes when you step back into the place that shaped you. At family dinners, I sat with my shoulders slightly rounded, a habit from childhood meant to take up less space. My father would sit at the head of the table. A chair he never questioned, a position he never relinquished. He used presence the way some men use volume. He rarely had to say much. His silence had gravity. My mother moved through meals like she moved through life, managing peace as though it was a job description. Mason filled space the way younger siblings sometimes do when authority has already been claimed by someone else. He joked, he provoked, he prodded, and if the atmosphere shifted wrong, he sat back and let silence cover his tracks. I spoke only when necessary. One world expected my voice. The other assumed my silence. The contrast sat inside me like two versions of discipline arguing over which one defined me more. On base, I was Holt. Off base, I was Avery. The name sounded softer in that house, like it belonged to someone smaller. I could command a squad, but could not command a peaceful meal without tension humming beneath the table. It is a strange thing to be respected by strangers for qualities your family still tries to train out of you. Soldiers admired my steadiness. My father called it attitude. Soldiers thanked me for fairness. Mason called it being uptight. Soldiers trusted me to bring clarity. My mother interpreted it as coldness. In uniform, I carried a badge and handcuffs. At home, those same hands felt empty, as if authority evaporated somewhere between the front gate of Fort Cavazos and the driveway of my parents' house. When young soldiers struggled, they would sometimes say, "Staff Sergeant, I froze. I could not make my voice come out. I always answered with patience." That happens. Training fixes that. But I never told them that sometimes adulthood does not erase childhood instincts. It only buries them under medals and schedules and salutes. Sometimes the instinct to shrink is older than the instinct to stand tall. There were nights after long shifts when I sat in my car outside my family home with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly, calming myself not from fear of violence, but from anticipation of walking back into a role I never chose. A good daughter, a quiet one, the one who did not challenge tradition, the one who responded, "Yes, sir," even when sir was not respect, but compliance. I never called my father sir, but in that house I moved as though I had. Respect in the Army is earned. Respect in my home was demanded. In uniform, discipline is structure. At home, discipline was dominance. In uniform, correction has purpose. At home, correction had ego. There is a saying among military leaders: do not confuse fear with respect. Fear is temporary and fragile. Respect is steady and lasting. My childhood taught me fear. My service taught me the difference. I carried handcuffs for strangers. For him, I carried shame. Shame is quiet. It is not loud like anger. It sits waiting for moments when vulnerability feels familiar. Even after years of confidence stepping into that house, made me feel 12 again, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. I did not tell anyone at work, not because I feared judgment. Soldiers understand complicated families better than most. It was because I believed I had outgrown it. That adulthood alone was distance. But distance is not always measured in years or miles. Sometimes it is measured in moments where strength does not follow you inside. The world saw two versions of me and believed both. A woman in uniform does not erase the girl who learned to survive by becoming small. I could stop disputes in a barracks hallway with a single look, but one raised eyebrow from my father at dinner still made my stomach tighten. That duality did not make me weak. It made me human. And humanity is not something the Army trains out of you. It refines it. The truth is simple. It is easier to stand tall when no one remembers you small. The night everything changed, that truth met a boundary. A moment when the version of me forged by discipline refused to bow to the version shaped by fear. People talk about breaking points. Mine was not loud. It was the quiet shift when a soldier inside me outranked the child I used to be. And once that happened, nothing could force me back into silence again. Thanksgiving weekend is supposed to feel warm. Tables crowded kitchens, loud old stories retold like rituals. For many families, it is a holiday of comfort and blessings. For mine, it was a holiday of tension disguised as tradition. I drove off base Friday afternoon with the same knot in my stomach I always felt before visiting home. Even 7 years in the Army could not shake that instinct. Habit lives deep like muscle memory you do not want but still carry. I pulled into the driveway just before sunset. The house looked the same as always, porch light glowing a flag hanging neatly beside the front door. I remember thinking how strange it was that a symbol of freedom hung over a house where obedience mattered more than peace. My father opened the door before I reached the top step. He always did, as if timing his arrival to prove he controlled the opening scene. "Avery," he said, like my name was a test I had passed and he was still deciding whether he approved. I nodded. "Dad." My mother hugged me quickly as though warmth was something she rationed. She smelled like laundry detergent and cinnamon, familiar and faintly sad. Mason appeared behind them, leaning on the doorframe with the casual confidence of someone who never faced consequence. "Well, look who thinks she is too important to check in," he said. "Welcome home, soldier." The way he emphasized soldier made it sound like mockery. I exhaled slowly the way I do before walking into a briefing that already smells like conflict. Dinner was laid out on the table: turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, a picture worthy of a magazine if you ignored the weight in the room. We sat. My father carved the turkey with the precision of someone who believed control belonged in every gesture. My mother offered me food. Mason offered commentary. "Bet the army food does not taste like this," he said. "Not with all that discipline you breathe in over there." It got a forced laugh from my father, another from himself. I ate quietly, focusing on chewing, breathing, holding posture. In formation, stillness earns respect. Here, it invited scrutiny. My father poured himself a glass of whiskey, then another. He always said whiskey was his reward for hard work, as if the world owed him a drink for surviving his own rules. He turned to me. "You still like working out there?" "That place." His voice carried a tone that implied my life choices needed his permission. "Yes," I said. "I like my job." He nodded slowly, studying me. "You think you got so much discipline now?" "The army did not raise you." "I did." Mason smirked. "Yeah, Dad taught discipline before she even knew how to spell it." My mother smiled tightly, eyes darting, hoping to keep the peace without actually doing anything to create it. I let silence settle the way I did in uniform when a room needed clarity rather than reaction. He poured more whiskey. "You know what I think. I think you walk around thinking you are better than us now. Wearing that uniform like a badge of honor we did not earn." I met his eyes. It was not defiance, it was steadiness. "I am proud of my service." Silence again, heavier this time. Pride was not a currency that held value in that house unless he was the one spending it. We moved to the living room after dinner, the television on, but no one watching. Football game noise filled the air, the way background noise fills a waiting room before something breaks. My father stared at the screen, jaw tight. Mason poked at me from the side. "Bet soldiers cannot handle real family life once they get brainwashed over there." My patience had edges, but they held. I had learned that calm is not the absence of reaction. It is the presence of control. My father suddenly turned the TV volume down. "Avery, come here." His voice had that tone, the one that used to lock my spine into place when I was a child. I walked over and stood. He did not look at me at first. He sipped his drink. "Your mother and I were talking. We could use some help this month. Bills, repairs, life. You understand?" His tone made it sound like a reasonable request, but the sharpness in his eyes said the opposite. I had helped before. Quietly. Consistently. I supported when they struggled, because that is what family does. But lately, I had been drawing boundaries, saving for my future, choosing independence. "I can help with groceries or something small," I said. "I have my own expenses." The room shifted. Not a breath moved. Mason let out a low whistle. "Someone thinks she makes officer money." I ignored him. My father turned fully toward me now, eyes narrowing. "That attitude. I raised you better. You think you can say no to your own family." My heart beat steady but deep. I took a breath. "I do not have extra to give this month, Dad." The honesty was simple, but in that house, honesty could feel like rebellion. His jaw clicked. That jaw always clicked when control slipped. He pointed toward the hallway cabinet. "You have a savings account. I saw the paperwork months ago. You can help." "Just do what is right." He said right like it belonged to him. "I do have savings," I replied evenly. "It is for emergencies and future plans. I am not giving you access." His face tightened slowly like a cord, stretching close to snapping. My mother froze. Mason grinned like he had just seen someone challenge a king in a room full of loyal soldiers. My father stood up. Not fast, slow, intentional, the way someone rises when they intend to make their presence heavier. "My roof, my rules," he said quietly. Words that had shaped my childhood like steel bent around bone. I did not move. I did not shrink. Not this time. I pay for my life, I said, calm, controlled. The truth held still in the air like a drawn breath. His eyes darkened. That was the moment, the quiet ignition of something dangerous. He was not used to being told no. He was not used to boundaries. Boundaries in his mind were disrespect disguised as independence. I could feel a shift, like a storm rolling in from miles away, but you can already smell the rain. My mother whispered his name. Robert. Soft. Useless. Mason leaned back, amused, ready for a scene, because he had never been the one at the center of it. I steadied myself internally, the way I would before stepping into a tense barracks call. Assess. Breathe. Keep voice level. My father took a slow step forward, not fast enough to call it aggression, not slow enough to call it calm. His eyes locked on mine. You think you are too good for this family now. Too good for the man who raised you. I hold myself with posture every day at work. In that moment, I used every ounce of training not to look away. I am not above you, Dad. I am separate. Those words changed something, not just in him, in me. Separate. Independence named as independence claimed. The room felt smaller. The air tasted like old battles I had spent years pretending were past. He set his glass down harder than he needed to. I felt the drop in the atmosphere the way soldiers feel tension before a fight. Tradition in my family said the next move would not be mine. But tradition was exactly what I had outgrown. Boundaries do not speak loudly. They speak clearly. And mine had just been declared. The storm had not broken yet. But it was coming. And for the first time in my life, I was not the one bracing to endure it. I was the one ready to stand through it. The storm arrived just after midnight. Rain hammered the roof like a heartbeat gone wrong. Thunder rolled low and steady, the kind that does not frighten you, but warns you. The house always felt tighter when it rained, as if the walls leaned in to listen. I stood in the kitchen rinsing my mug, trying to quiet my thoughts with small tasks. The overhead light buzzed pale and tired, casting long shadows across the counters. I could still feel the tension from earlier at the dinner table, a residue that clung to the air like humidity. I heard his footsteps before I turned. Slow, heavy, certain. My father entered the kitchen with that same expression he always wore when he thought discipline was required. Not anger. Conviction. He glanced at the sink, then at me, as though the way I stood in my own childhood home somehow offended him. You think you can talk to me like that? He said quietly. No shout. Just a low rumble, a warning tone I had known all my life. I kept my voice controlled. I set a boundary. That is all. His jaw tightened. Boundaries. That word again. It sounded wrong in his mouth, like a challenge he had not approved. Rain beat against the window harder. He stepped closer. I am your father. You do not get to say no to me. I turned off the faucet. Drying my hands gave me a second to breathe. In uniform, breathing buys clarity. At home, it bought danger. I answered carefully. I respect you, but I make my own decisions. Something flickered in his eyes. Not surprise. Insult. To him, independence was betrayal. Mason leaned against the doorway, watching. Of course he did. He always watched conflict like it was entertainment, as long as he was not the one in the center of it. My mother stood near the dining room entry, frozen halfway between wanting to intervene and choosing not to see. The storm outside cracked open with lightning. Inside, my father moved. Not fast. Measured. The way someone moves who expects obedience, not resistance. He reached for my arm, fingers clamping down just above my wrist, hard enough to send pressure radiating through muscle and bone. A reflex kicked in from training. Awareness flared. Distance, leverage, control. But this was not a detainee on base. This was my father. That hesitation cost me. His grip tightened. You do not disrespect me in my own house, he said. The world shrank to the sound of rain, the warmth of the kitchen light, and the feel of fingers sinking into flesh like iron. My voice stayed steady even as adrenaline rose. Let go of me. He did not. He pulled, Hard. My balance broke. My hip hit the counter and the world tilted. My foot slipped on the wet tile near the sink. The fall felt both instant and endless. A flash of ceiling, the sharp slap of air leaving my lungs as I went down. Then a sound that did not belong in a kitchen. A sharp, sickening crack, not loud, but undeniable. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No pain, no thought. Just stillness like time inhaled and held its breath. Shock is quiet. The body protects itself first by going silent. Then, sensation returned like a flood. Pain did not come as a scream. It arrived as a deep, pulsing jolt radiating from my forearm like it had its own heartbeat. My vision blurred. I tasted metal in my mouth, a copper tang sharp enough to notice even through the dizziness. My cheek pressed against cold tile. I heard rain. I heard my own breathing short and controlled. I heard my father's voice low and sharp. You do not defy your father. This house. My rules. Then my mother's whisper, barely audible. Stop, Robert. Please. She said it like a prayer she expected to go unanswered. Mason exhaled a soft laugh, not cruel, just detached like a spectator in a movie he thought he had seen before. I pushed against the floor, trying to lift myself. Pain shot up my arm, white-hot, clean, and blinding. Bones talk differently when they are not where they belong. I swallowed hard, forced breath steady. I had arrested men for less. The thought cut through the haze like training kicking in when panic tries to take ground. My father stood over me, not reaching to help, watching, waiting for me to fold back into the shape he understood. The rain outside grew louder wind, pushing against the windows. It felt like the world wanted to come in and witness what took place in the quiet corners of homes that looked respectable from the street. I shifted and sat up slowly, protecting my injured arm against my chest. My breathing stayed even, but inside, something had already changed. I did not look away from him, did not shrink, did not fold. I stood, one movement at a time, calm, deliberate, the way a soldier rises from the ground under weight, not surrendering to it. My father expected apology, surrender, a return to the hierarchy that shaped my childhood. Instead, I said 5 quiet words that altered everything. I am leaving now, Dad. His face flickered. Not worry, not guilt, disbelief, like the rules of gravity had changed without his consent. You walk out that door and you do not come back. His voice carried the finality of someone who believed he still had the power to shape consequences. I did not hesitate. The front door felt a mile away, but I walked it anyway, head high, arm cradled, steps steady despite the pain. My mother reached out slightly as if to touch my shoulder, then let her hand fall before it made contact. Mason leaned back, expression unreadable except for one clear truth. He believed I would be back. He believed history was destiny. The storm outside greeted me like air after confinement. I stepped into it without turning back. Rain soaked my clothes instantly cold and sharp against my skin, but nothing felt as cold as the moment inside that house. I sat in my truck, breathing through pain so intense it pulsed behind my eyes. I could call someone. I could wait. I could cry, but I did not. I started the engine with my good hand and pulled away. Every bump in the road sent another shock through my arm, but pain did not stop movement. Fear did not stop breathing. I drove through the storm toward Fort Cavazos' headlights cutting through sheets of rain. I do not remember every turn, only the steady rhythm of wipers and the ache that grew heavier with every mile. I reached the gate and saw the familiar stance of MPs on duty, rain slickers shining under the lights posture still disciplined even at this hour. I rolled down the window, voice barely a whisper, but steady. I need medical. Now. They saw the brace I made with my hand over my forearm. They saw my face. They moved fast. Another set of boots running, doors opening, voices urgent but calm, help arriving like structure returning to a world that had twisted just hours before. As they lifted me out and guided me into the medical center, the last thought that anchored itself in my mind was not pain. It was clarity. If he wanted obedience, he had just lost it forever. And whatever broke in me that night, something else strengthened in its place. I walked out on my own terms. That was the first victory. The rest would come. Quietly, steadily, and without apology. The drive to the base felt both endless and strangely fast, like time was bending around the pain. Every turn of the wheel sent shockwaves through my injured arm, but my grip stayed locked, knuckles white, jaw tight. Rain smeared across the windshield like the world outside was dissolving, leaving only the road, the hum of the engine, and the pounding ache under my skin. I did not remember every streetlight or curve. I remembered focus, the kind drilled into muscle memory. Stay conscious. Stay moving. Get to safety. Pain is loud, but purpose is louder. By the time I reached the gate at Fort Cavazos, the storm had softened into a steady drizzle. The headlights reflected off wet pavement, painting the world in blurred gold and shadow. An MP stepped toward my truck flashlight beam, cutting across the window. He started his standard greeting, but stopped when he saw my face and the way my left arm was cradled tight against my body. "Staff Sergeant Holt, you all right?" His voice shifted instantly from routine to alert. I shook my head once. "I need medical." His radio was in his hand before I finished speaking. Another soldier approached, opening my truck door carefully. They moved with the same steady urgency I had used countless times. No panic, just action. One MP guided me out, shielding me from the rain with his jacket. The other jogged toward the emergency entrance, calling ahead. I had walked into medical centers dozens of times in uniform, but walking in as a patient, injured, vulnerable, felt different. The sterile hallway lights glared bright against the dark outside. A nurse came forward, hands steady, eyes sharper than any inspection checklist. She guided me toward a bed and helped me sit, then examined the brace I had improvised with the sleeve of my jacket and my right hand supporting my forearm. "What happened?" she asked softly. Not accusing, not assuming, just assessing. I opened my mouth, but words felt heavy, not because I did not know the truth, because speaking it made it real. She watched my hesitation, noticed the bruising, already forming beneath skin, the swelling starting to bloom. She did not push. Instead, she simply nodded as though she already knew. "We see this," her eyes seemed to say. "You are not the first. You are not alone." Another nurse slid an IV gently into my arm and placed a warm blanket over my shoulders. "Pain medication will help soon," she said. "Your body is in shock." I lay back against the pillow, breathing slow through clenched teeth as the world steadied. Rain tapped against the windows in a calm rhythm, now a stark contrast to the storm inside my bones. A doctor entered, flipping through the chart quickly. "The X-ray confirms a clean break," he said. "Forceful impact. There are also signs of older trauma near the same area." His tone remained clinical, but his pause carried meaning. This did not just happen once. My pulse thudded once hard. Memories surfaced like bruises rising under skin. 12 years old, flinching under a raised hand. Years of silence disguised as discipline. My breath came slow, deliberate. The way it does when you brace for truth rather than avoid it. The doctor's gaze met mine. "You are safe here," he said. Then gently, this did not happen by accident. His voice was not intrusive. It held space, gave dignity. Something inside me loosened, not weakness, but the release that comes when a burden you carried alone is finally seen without needing to be confessed. My throat felt tight, but my words were steady. I drove here myself. It was the only way to get help. The nurse returned, checking vitals again, her expression steady and warm. "You did the right thing coming here," she said. That sentence was simple, but it carried weight. Doing the right thing and doing the familiar thing are rarely the same. Familiar for me had always been silence. But silence is a habit, not a virtue. The doctor set the chart down gently. "We have protocols for situations like this, Sergeant. You do not have to go through it alone." That word again, alone. It echoed not as a threat, but as a memory. Alone, sitting at a kitchen table when tension thickened the air. Alone, driving through rain with one working arm. But in that moment, surrounded by trained observers who recognized truth without needing it, shouted alone felt like a choice, not a sentence. I stared at the ceiling tiles again. The same pattern I saw when I woke up. but now I was fully awake in every way that mattered. Staying silent would mean teaching him that he could go further next time. Silence would not preserve peace. It would preserve power for the wrong person. If I stayed silent, I would be the one who taught him to keep going. The truth settled in my chest with clarity that did not shake. My voice, when I finally spoke, was not loud, but it carried the weight of a decision years in the making. I need to file a report. The nurse nodded. The doctor stepped back already, signaling for someone to contact the MP duty office. The room shifted not physically, but in atmosphere. In the military, once a statement is made, wheels turn. Process begins. Order forms around truth. A young MP entered a few minutes later, hat tucked under his arm, posture respectful. "Sergeant Holt, I am here to assist." His eyes held recognition not of me personally, but of the courage it takes for any soldier to speak up about harm. His voice carried no pity, only respect. He asked if I needed time before speaking. I shook my head. No. If I paused, doubt might try to crawl back in. He pulled out a report form and began the formal process, reading each question, clearly giving me space to answer without rush. I stayed factual, calm. Training took over. The same composure I used documenting the worst nights in other soldiers' lives now steadied me in my own. When it was done, he closed his notebook with quiet finality. "We will follow procedure. You did the right thing, Sergeant." The words landed like a marker in time, a departure from who I had been before that night. The pain in my arm pulsed again, but it felt different now. Not a reminder of weakness, but of the cost of silence and the strength it took to end it. Outside, dawn began softening the sky. A faint glow touched the edge of the window. Morning always comes even after the longest night. I breathed in slow, let the air settle deep, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like air belonged to me. The storm had passed, not the one outside, the one inside, and I had walked myself through it, not broken, just waking up. Pain throbbed through my arm in slow waves, but my mind had already shifted into a mode I knew well. Not panic, not shock, procedure. The instinct that steadies every military police soldier when emotion threatens to break through discipline. A nurse asked if I needed rest before continuing reports. I shook my head. Rest can wait. Truth cannot. I reached for the phone with my good hand and dialed the MP duty desk directly. My voice came out steady low, clipped in that tone every soldier recognizes as controlled urgency. "This is Staff Sergeant Holt. Domestic assault incident. I need to initiate restricted reporting and evidence documentation." The duty NCO paused only 1 second. Enough to register the weight of what I was saying, not enough to interrupt protocol. "Understood, Sergeant. My location was relayed. Procedures started. There is comfort in the Army's predictability. Pain does not derail discipline. It activates it." A young specialist arrived first with a camera. Her expression respectful, posture straight. She did not rush toward pity or hesitation. She defaulted to training. "Sergeant, with your permission, I need to photograph injuries. Permission granted." I pulled the hospital blanket down slightly to expose the bruising. The skin along my forearm had already turned deep violet, swelling, rising in uneven ridges. The specialist hesitated only long enough to confirm lighting and angle, then began snapping photos, each shutter click sounding like a timestamp on truth. Flash, bone swelling. Flash, skin discoloration. Flash, dusting marks around the wrist where fingers had clamped too hard. I kept my eyes forward, breathing slow and even. This was evidence, not memory. Memory is emotional. Evidence is undeniable. When she finished, she asked quietly, "Do you need a pause?" No. Continuing, the next step was the sworn statement. DA Form 2823. I could have dictated, but I insisted on writing. Using my uninjured hand, I steadied the clipboard on my lap and moved slowly, each letter careful and precise. Date, time, location, relationship of subject, incident description. No embellishment, no flair, just the kind of detail that dissolves excuses. I learned long ago that words can be weapons when used carelessly, but they can be armor when shaped with accuracy. The specialist asked softly, "Subject name." I met her eyes. "My father." The word did not tremble. She nodded once. Not sympathy. Acknowledgement. She continued noting chain of custody details, safe storage for digital evidence, injury documentation protocols. Everything systematic, professional, predictable. A captain from the MP office arrived next, clipboard in hand, expression steady and serious. Holt, I am here as duty officer, I affirmed with a nod. He did not offer condolences. He offered a process. We will handle this by the book. Medical records, photos, sworn statements, timeline verification, witness list. You will not be on this alone. Protocol becomes comfort in crisis. It replaces chaos with order, fear with structure. This is why soldiers breathe easier in procedure. It builds a scaffolding around pain so it cannot swallow you whole. The captain asked his questions one by one, voice even, pace respectful. Were there witnesses? Yes. Names Linda Holt and Mason Holt. He wrote without hesitation. He did not ask if they supported me. Support is irrelevant to truth. The question is presence, confirmation. Next, did the subject threaten further harm? His line was clear, I said. If you walk out, do not come back. The captain scribbled. That qualifies as implied coercion. And then, did he attempt to stop you from leaving the residence? He grabbed my arm, pulled me, caused the fall. He caused the fracture. Silence. Not discomfort, just wait. The kind of pause soldiers use when they need to respect what has been spoken before moving forward. Thank you for the clarity, he said softly. Then he signed the report. A nurse returned with a sling and immobilizer brace, carefully positioning it. Pain shot through my arm again, bright and sharp, but I breathed through it, counting in my head, like during stress drills. Inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 6. Breath is command when the body wants to panic. When the MP specialist collected the statement, she paused. Sergeant, do you want advocacy services notified? I thought for a moment. Emotion wanted to say no out of habit, but instinct, the trained one, not the conditioned one, answered. Yes. It was the first time in years I chose help rather than endurance. A counselor arrived, sitting beside my bed without leaning in too close, without soft pity in her voice. Calm, respectful, trauma-aware. You do not have to speak until you want to. Silence is a choice now, not survival. I nodded. Silence used to shield me. Now it would only shield him. She handed me a small card with resources and legal protections listed. I tucked it carefully into my pocket. Then came the final step. The captain reviewed everything and looked directly at me. Holt, if this goes forward unrestricted, the civilian authorities will also be notified. The switch from restricted to unrestricted reporting is a line you cross only when ready, but I had already crossed something far greater that night. My voice steady. Unrestricted. His eyes held pride, not for the pain, but for the courage to confront it. Understood, and I will support that decision. Evidence secure. Statement signed. Photos logged. Medical documentation complete. Chain of custody sealed. The paperwork was not emotional. It was liberation printed in ink. Emotions end cases. Evidence wins them. When the room finally quieted, the storm outside had passed. The first hint of dawn light crept through the blinds, pale and tender, as if the world was resetting itself one breath at a time. I leaned back slowly, brace tight, heart steady, and closed my eyes for one brief moment of rest. Not because I was defeated, because I was finally standing. And in that stillness, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not fear, not guilt, not silence. Authority. Not the kind given by rank or badge. The kind earned by truth, spoken pain, named, and a line drawn so clearly it could never be crossed again. The soldier in me had arrived, and she was not leaving. They came 2 days later, right after sunrise, when the street still smelled like damp earth and coffee brewing behind blinds. Civilian patrol cruisers rolled up first, then the county investigator, then one MP liaison from base to observe, because jurisdiction threads get tight when a soldier files unrestricted domestic assault against a civilian family member in a military town. Their tires crushed leftover rain puddles, leaving ripples crawling across the pavement like nerves under skin. I did not go with them. I stayed on base, sitting straight-backed in an office chair while the officer in charge briefed me quietly. His voice held that same calm certainty that good leaders have when they know a soldier has done something difficult and right. Meanwhile, my parents' street awakened to uniforms and unmarked sedans the way small neighborhoods do whenever something shatters the illusion of normal. Neighbors stepped onto porches in robes, crossed arms peered through blinds, pretending not to stare. A dog barked from behind a fence. A sprinkler sputtered to life in the yard next door, innocent and oblivious. At my parents' house, my father answered the door with a righteous indignation already bubbling in his voice like he had practiced the speech in his head long before sunrise came. Officers announced themselves, badges and body cams reflecting soft morning light. "We're here in reference to a domestic assault report, sir." They said my name, my full rank, and just like that, something in his posture faltered. Not guilt. Pride hit by surprise. He scoffed loudly enough for half the block to hear. "Domestic assault, my daughter. That girl is dramatic. She's been influenced by that army. Too many rules, too much thinking she knows better." His voice wrapped itself in bravado, the kind that swells when a man believes the world still bends for him. My mother hovered behind him, wringing her hands like she always did, her voice small and shaky. "Officers, there must be a misunderstanding," she whispered. Mason stood in the hallway behind them, arms crossed, smirking like this was another moment where he expected the world to confirm the family script. Holt men do not get questioned. Holt men get obeyed. But authority wears different colors now, I thought, as I sat miles away at the MP desk, staring at the duty phone, waiting for confirmation. On that porch, officers requested permission to view external security footage. My father waved a dismissive arm. "I have nothing to hide." That arrogance was his final mistake. They reviewed it right there on the front lawn. Neighbors leaned farther against porches, pretending to water plants that did not need watering, pretending to tie shoes that did not need tying. They watched the officers huddle around a small screen, while my father's voice rose almost pleading, almost offended by the very existence of accountability. It took less than 2 minutes, less than 2 breaths in the grand scale of years he held control. The footage showed it clearly, his hand gripping my arm, the pull, the stumble, the fall, the moment my body hit the tile. No sound needed. Violence has a visual language that speaks without audio. Mason's smirk cracked first. My mother's knees wobbled. But my father, he held steady until the officers turned to him with new posture. "Sir, we need you to step outside." One officer's hand rested near his cuffs already. My father's voice pitched high, the tone of a man deeply insulted by reality. "You believe her over your own eyes. She is confused. She is trying to embarrass us. She is being manipulated, but even pride cannot erase visual evidence." They asked him to put his hands behind his back. He refused first, and I imagine the moment his face changed, that click in his mind, where he realized the narrative was no longer his to control. The cuffs clicked. That sound travels differently when you're the one hearing it from the other side. I had applied restraints on duty countless times with the same measured motion, same firm lock, same secure double check. Now that same metallic snap echoed off my parents, siding off church quiet morning air, off the stunned silence of neighbors who had spent years smiling politely at my father across potluck tables. My mother gasped, covering her mouth like the arrest was violence, and the violence itself was misunderstanding. Tears streamed down her face, her voice shaking as she reached for him while never stepping fully forward. "She's ruining us," she cried, voice cracking under shock and shame. "She is destroying her own family." The pastor from the church 3 houses down arrived as if summoned by the sound of status collapsing. He hurried down the walkway, adjusting his coat, speaking with righteous calm. "Officers, please let us settle this privately. This is a family matter." He turned toward my mother, hand outstretched, offering prayer, offering mediation, offering the age-old solution of silence wrapped in scripture. But silence no longer lived here. The lead officer shook his head firmly. "No, sir. Someone was harmed. This is not private. It never is once the law gets involved." The pastor's face fell, his authority shrinking as real authority held ground. My mother sobbed harder, not out of concern for my arm, but the loss of image, the shattering of a polished facade she spent decades polishing. Mason stood frozen, unable to find the old script where arrogance saved him. He had no lines for this. Neighbors whispered. Church ladies clutched robes around themselves, gossip already birthing in real time, the kind that burns faster than wildfire in communities built on reputation. Someone recorded from a porch. There is always someone recording now. The camera caught my father being guided toward the cruiser, wrists locked behind him, pride collapsing with each step. The door shut, quiet, heavy, final. Later, when the call finally came through to the MP desk confirming detainment and transfer to county custody pending domestic violence charges, I did not smile. There was no victory yell inside me, no triumph. Just a long, quiet exhale, the release of weight that had sat on my spine for nearly 3 decades. Justice is not loud, it is structural. It moves like gears clicking into place, precise and irreversible. A senior MP walked by, paused, looked at me. You all right, Holt? I met his eyes. Yes, Sergeant Major. I am. My voice was steady, not hard, not shaking, simply truthful. Back at my parents' street, the cruiser pulled away. The pastor walked home, defeated. Neighbors retreated inside, buzzing with judgment and shock, and my mother stood in the doorway, her sobs rising into the air like mourning songs, not for her husband's actions, but for the collapse of a reputation she worshipped. And as the morning sun broke fully through cloud cover warming sidewalks still wet with rain, the truth settled across that block like new law. Fear had been the ruler there. Silence its shield. But silence had broken, and nothing that breaks that clean ever fits back into place again. News in a town like Killeen does not travel. It spreads. It bleeds into grocery lines, barber chairs, church pews, CrossFit gyms, PTA meetings, bank lobbies, and the dusty aisles of feed stores where old men lean on carts like confessionals. It finds every ear that ever nodded politely at Sunday socials and every mouth that ever whispered behind cupped hands. My father was formally charged under Texas Penal Code assault causing bodily injury. The words looked sterile on paper, but they carried weight. They meant there was a record now. Something that could not be prayed away, reasoned away, shouted away, or buried beneath years of obedience. He was released pending trial, but release did not mean freedom. Reputation becomes a cell when the world finally sees what lived in shadows. The church women who once praised my mother's grace now whispered pity sharper than knives. The men who once slapped my father's shoulder with admiration now nodded stiffly, avoiding eye contact, pretending their palms had never touched a man accused of harming his daughter. Mason tried to laugh it off at work, acting like he was above it all, calling the charge exaggerated, calling me dramatic. He forgot people can read tone. He forgot everyone had seen the squad cars and the familiar county badge at our curb. He forgot arrogance has a lonely aftertaste. Then someone leaked one of his old text threads, screenshots floating through the workplace like wildfire. Messages mocking me, calling discipline weakness, calling boundaries betrayal, calling women emotional animals better put in their place. It only takes one screenshot to expose a culture people suspected but never proved. The HR manager called him in. He walked out without his job. The smirk he lived behind cracked into something smaller, bitter, and hollow. I heard through a neighbor he punched his steering wheel until the horn stuck. Rage feels different when it has nowhere to go. My mother held on the longest. She ironed my father's shirts for court dates even when his shoulders were not there to fill them. She sat in her living room staring at framed photos of holidays that never actually felt joyful. She attended church alone while whispers built around her like a wall. She told people she was praying for peace, but the truth was she prayed for reputation. Without his paycheck and with legal fees stacking like bricks around her, she fell behind on bills. Pride does not pay for utilities. Shame does not negotiate with mortgage lenders. One afternoon, she sat in the car parked outside the church for an hour. Hands on the wheel, shoulders hunched, and did not go in. Someone saw her. People always see you when you break, they just do not know how to help when they've never learned to speak beyond gossip. The house eventually went up for sale. The yard that once echoed with my father's pride now echoed with strangers doing walkthroughs, judging chipped trim and faded shutters. Plates clinked in the kitchen as estate agents prepared brochures. Once familiar walls stripped of family pictures left ghost outlines on the paint squares of brighter life where faces used to hang. A for sale sign cracked in the wind like a flag surrendering. I did not drive by. People sent me updates without asking. Pain likes company, but healing prefers distance. The community split, as communities do in these stories, half pretended they always knew something was off. Half insisted they were shocked, and a small few truly realized how little they ever understand about the quiet lives behind well-trimmed bushes and polite nods at church doors. Authority in a small town is fragile. Once cracked, the pieces cut sharper than any blade. My mother tried to call me once blocked number popping up ringing long enough to feel like intention, not impulse. I let it ring. My voicemail stayed empty. I imagined her whispering to the pastor, voice breaking into a tremor only audible in confession. She ruined us. But truth does not ruin people. Truth tends to reveal what already lived there. In quiet apartments near base, soldiers asked how I was holding up. Some offered silent nods instead of words. A few told me their own stories in low voices about fathers and fists and childhoods that taught obedience before safety. I did not comfort them. I listened. Listening is sometimes the most dignified version of strength. I did not celebrate his arrest. Justice is not something to toast when blood ties are involved. It deserves something steadier than celebration. Reflection. Stillness. Acknowledgement. The day his court date was set, I sat on my barracks bed and pressed my thumb lightly along the edge of my brace, feeling the faint ache of healing bone. The pain had dulled, but memory lingers in nerves long after wounds close. I whispered one single sentence, not for him, but for the girl I used to be. He broke my arm. I broke the cycle. It was not victory. It was liberation. Different things entirely. When a soldier breaks rank to stand alone, some call it rebellion. Others call it courage. But those who know, really know, call it reclaiming command. He once believed authority came from volume. Now he learned authority can also come from silence. The kind of silence that closes doors permanently. That rewrites lineage. That stops generational habits like a wall you finally choose to build instead of crumble under. My mother faded into quiet apartment living somewhere across town. Mason couch hopped between friends, pride shrinking thin. My father faced trial not as a patriarch, but as a man accountable under law stripped of the illusion that fatherhood excuses harm. They did not collapse because I spoke. They collapsed because truth stood and they could not stand beside it. Families built on fear fall when fear loses its throne. People asked if I felt guilty watching their world unravel. No. Guilt belongs to choice, not consequence. They chose silence. They chose control. They chose reputation over repair. I chose something new, dignity. And dignity once chosen does not return borrowed. It becomes permanent. The world they built could not hold once I stepped out of it. Sometimes survival looks like staying quiet. Sometimes strength looks like swallowing hurt. But eventually, strength looks like leaving, and leaving was the first step. Telling the truth was the second. Watching the facade fall was not revenge. It was gravity, and gravity owes no one an apology. 4 months passed. Enough time for bruises to fade, bones to knit, and the world to stop tilting every time I woke up remembering the sound of tile and bone colliding. Healing is not dramatic. It is routine. Physical therapy sessions early in the morning, strength returning one quiet repetition at a time, new housing assignment on base, small but sunlit quiet in a way silence never felt in my childhood home. My days filled with structure again, formations, duty rosters, training briefs, paperwork, counseling, soldiers, the rhythmic certainty of military life. Order returned. Peace followed slow but steady. I had stopped checking for updates about them. Every time someone tried to bring it up, I simply lifted a hand. Thank you. I do not need to know. Let what is broken crumble without my audience. Then, on a Friday afternoon, as the Texas heat baked the concrete and soldiers shuffled toward the weekend, I received a text from the Visitor Control Center. Sergeant Holt, your parents are here requesting to see you. For a moment, the world froze. Not panic, not fear, just recognition. History always tries one last time before it accepts defeat. I walked toward the visitor center with measured steps, my boots steady on pavement warmed by sun. The lobby buzzed softly with printers, murmured conversations, rotating ceiling fans pushing stale air around. And there they sat. My mother, first perched on the edge of a plastic chair like she was afraid the furniture might reject her too. Makeup carefully applied, outfit ironed, trying to hold together dignity, like it was a fabric she could smooth if she pressed hard enough. My father beside her, posture deflated, hands clasped together tightly, knuckles pale. Not the man who towered at kitchen tables, not the voice that once filled rooms with command. Smaller somehow, age showing, pride cracked. Mason was not with them. It surprised me less than it should have. My mother stood first, moving toward me with trembling hope in her eyes. "Avery, sweetheart, we just want to talk." My father followed, voice brittle, a tone unfamiliar. "We are still your family. Families stick together." I stood still, hands relaxed at my sides, posture steady. I did not step back, but I did not step forward either. Distance is not always measured in feet. My mother wrung her hands. "We made mistakes. We know that now. We just want to fix things." He added quickly, "We need help. The mortgage, the court fees. Life has been hard." The sentence trailed as if expecting sympathy to fill in the gaps, as if hardship was justification for history. My chest remained still, calm. They waited for me to fill the quiet. I did not. Silence does not belong to fear in my life anymore. Eventually, my mother reached for the old script. Family should stand together. That phrase once felt sacred. Now, it sounded like a leash disguised as devotion. I let the words settle. Then I spoke with the same tone I used during duty interviews, the one forged by discipline rather than emotion. Family protects each other. That has not been true here for a long time. My mother blinked as if the air shifted. My father swallowed hard, as though pride scraped his throat on the way down. "We are asking for forgiveness, Avery," he said. His voice cracked not with remorse but frustration that apology did not automatically restore hierarchy. Forgiveness does not mean return. Forgiveness does not erase consequence. They looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. In a way, I was. The language of boundaries. The language of adulthood unshaped by fear. My mother's voice broke into tears. "You are all we have. Please, help us get through this. Help us come back together." My father pushed words through clenched teeth. "We need you." There it was, the truth beneath every layer. Need not love. Dependence disguised as devotion. My pulse did not rise. My breath did not shake. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small card, and set it gently on the counter between us. A domestic violence hotline, and a financial assistance resource number printed below it. My mother stared at it like it was a foreign object. My father stiffened. I spoke quietly. "These can help you. Not me." Their eyes widened. Not anger, not pain, but disbelief that the script had changed permanently. I held their gaze with steady composure. Love does not excuse harm. Blood does not erase evidence. My mother's shoulders collapsed, tears spilling faster. My father's face hardened into the last brittle shell of a man who once believed control was love and obedience was family. I took one step back, not out of fear, out of closure. You chose silence. I chose freedom. I turned. My boots echoed once across tile. A door buzzed open. Sunlight glanced off the polished lobby floor. I walked out into the warm Texas afternoon without looking back. The glass door slid shut behind me, closing not just a room, but a lifetime. Some endings do not slam. They settle quietly, like dust after a long storm. Like breath returning to lungs after years held tight. Like walking away, finally feeling the ground belong to you. I did not need them to understand. Understanding is not required for peace. Distance is. Boundaries are. Freedom is. and I had finally claimed all three. After that day at the visitor center, life settled into a rhythm I had always imagined but never fully believed I deserved. I moved into on-base housing, a small one-bedroom unit near the oak trees by the training field windows, catching morning sun like an invitation instead of a warning. The first night there, I sat on the edge of my neatly made bed, boots off uniform, hanging crisply by the door, and listened to silence that did not demand fear or apology. Silence can bruise when it follows control, but this silence felt like oxygen. My days slipped back into order. PT in the early mornings, body rebuilding strength, slowly, each rep reminding me that healing is not sudden or loud, but steady and disciplined. I lifted lighter at first, breathing through memory and muscle learning again how to trust my own movement. No longer training for resilience against someone else's anger, but training to inhabit my own body fully without bracing for impact. Therapy became part of my routine too. I walked into behavioral health with shoulders straight, not because I wanted to look unshaken, but because I had earned the right to stand tall even while being vulnerable. My therapist asked questions with care, never digging, only opening doors I could walk through when ready. We talked about survival instincts, about loyalty twisted into obedience, about the difference between respect and fear. She did not try to rescue me. She helped me recognize I had already rescued myself. In quiet moments between sessions, I found strength in naming things I once swallowed. Shame left when silence left. At the gym, I sometimes saw younger soldiers watching me train, not with admiration, but recognition. They knew what survival looked like even when worn under uniform instead of bruises. One private approached me after a workout, eyes hesitant. "Sergeant, how do you know when it's time to walk away from people you love?" I held her gaze. "When staying costs you yourself." She nodded relief, trembling at the corner of her mouth like someone finally exhaled after holding breath for too long. Words are guidance when born from truth, not bitterness. I volunteered on weekends with the installation's family advocacy and domestic violence support program, not as a savior, but as a witness for those learning to believe their own pain matters. I sat in circles where voices trembled at first, then strengthened, where women and a few men spoke about battles fought in living rooms instead of battlefields, where leaving was not weakness but courage disguised as breaking. Sometimes I shared pieces of my story, not the dramatic ones, but the quiet ones. Learning to say no. Learning that love without safety is not love. Learning that leaving is not betrayal, it is survival turning into self-respect. They listened not because my rank held weight, but because my truth did. One afternoon, a commander I respect pulled me aside in the hallway. "Heard about what you did, Holt. Not the details, just the fact you stood up when others sit down." He paused, voice low. "Good soldiers protect others. Great soldiers protect themselves too. That meant more than any award ever could." On Sundays, when others gathered with families, I sat on my small patio with a cup of tea, watching the sky turn from gold to soft blue. No shouting in the next room. No footsteps to measure safety, by no tension waiting to snap. Just air, just sun, just my own pulse, slow and steady. Sometimes I missed the idea of family, not the reality. The version I used to imagine existed if I only tried harder, stayed quieter, bent further. But healing does not come from pretending what hurt you was home. Healing comes from building a life where peace is not borrowed, it is built. I sent nothing more to my parents. No updates, no explanations. Forgiveness, when it came, arrived not as a moment, but as a letting go. A soft release instead of a sharp break. I did not forgive what happened. I forgave myself for staying as long as I did. Justice did not roar. It settled. It lived in my spine instead of my fists. It showed up in nights where I slept deeply dreamless, unafraid. In mornings where discipline was devotion to myself, not obedience to someone else's anger. In knowing I could walk into any room, any memory, any mirror without shrinking. Quiet justice is not the absence of anger. It is the presence of peace, earned. And mine finally had room to breathe. Evening settles differently in Texas. It doesn't fall all at once. It rolls in slow as warm syrup across the sky. turning clouds gold, then orange, then a soft red that fades like a long exhale. I sat on my small porch in my green PT hoodie legs tucked under me, teacup warming my hands. The air carried that familiar late-day hush, like the world itself pauses before night fully arrives. Soldiers jogged past at a distance, their cadence faint, fading into the hum of insects waking in the brush. Wind rustled the oak branches overhead leaves, whispering secrets about seasons and growth and time. There was a time evenings made me anxious when dusk meant footsteps upstairs, voices rising, rules tightening like invisible ropes around my breath. Now, dusk felt like permission. Permission to breathe. Permission to exist without flinching at shadows. Permission to be quiet without being afraid. I sipped slowly, letting heat coat my throat, letting my shoulders soften into a posture I once believed was dangerous, relaxed. The bruise memories were gone, not erased, but moved somewhere behind me like mile markers on a road I no longer needed to revisit. My arm had long healed, strength returned scarless but never forgotten. Healing is strange. It doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. One day you simply realize you're no longer bracing for impact. You realize laughter can come without apology. You realize quiet doesn't require caution. You realize the door behind you doesn't need to be watched. In the distance, the flag lowered taps sounding faint across base 30 slow seconds of solemn honor. Once I associated that sound with service, with duty, with sacrifice. Tonight, it felt like honoring every version of myself that survived long enough to sit right here in this quiet. I used to think loyalty meant staying still, staying quiet, staying no matter how heavy silence got. I thought endurance was love and obedience was devotion. I thought leaving was failure. But loyalty that destroys you is not loyalty. It is captivity disguised as commitment. Leaving was not betrayal. Staying was betraying myself. The sun slid lower, painting the last sliver of sky, coral dipping behind tree line like a curtain closing softly on an old play. I breathed out slow, steady, the same way we breathe before qualifying on the range or stepping into a briefing. Except this time it wasn't preparation. It was release. I no longer rehearsed conversations in my head that would never be spoken. I no longer wondered if they thought of me, regretted anything, rewrote history in rooms filled with echoes. Their story kept going without me. Mine kept going without them. And peace didn't need their permission. Somewhere, a door shut, and instead of tensing, I just blinked. That was when I knew the cycle wasn't just broken, it was behind me. I ran my thumb along the cup's handle, feeling ceramic warmth present and real. Healing wasn't loud justice or dramatic vengeance. It was this: a porch, a sunset, steam curling from a cup, breath steady, future quiet and open. I used to think loyalty meant staying. Now I know loyalty starts with myself. The sky dimmed fully, first stars winking awake above base lights. Tomorrow would be another day of service, of structure, of purpose. A life I chose, a peace I earned. And as night settled gentle and sure, I let silence sit beside me without weight and whispered into the growing dark, I'm home. People love to say family means you stay no matter what. That loyalty means endurance. That silence is respect. Maybe you heard those words too. Maybe someone told you walking away makes you cold or ungrateful or disloyal. But here's the truth. They never say out loud staying in harm is not loyalty. It's sacrifice without honor. And nobody earns strength by shrinking for someone else's comfort. So I want to ask you honestly, not out of anger, but out of understanding. Have you ever been told that family comes first, even when it hurts? Do you believe that, or do you believe safety, dignity, and peace matter more than tradition and fear? If you've ever chosen distance to save yourself, if you've ever closed a door that others insisted stay open, if you've ever broken a cycle instead of continuing it, tell me in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if your journey still feels quiet or unfinished, if you're somewhere between knowing you deserve better and learning how to claim it, breathe. You're not alone. Breaking the cycle isn't selfish, it's brave. And sometimes bravery looks like walking away.